this was about as bizarre and as easy as it gets.
So the number for me was a number that would allow me to never have to work again.
I feel like we got top.
I went from a sale of $500,000 to in debt.
$192 million.
This is Built to Sell Radio with your host, John Warlow.
Hey guys, it's John Warlow. So after 5 years of hosting Built to Sell Radio, I've distilled the secrets from the most successful founders into the ultimate field guide. The art of selling your business, winning strategies, and secret hacks for exiting on top is now available. The art of selling your business is a playbook for punching above your weight in a negotiation to sell your company. Now, you may still be years away from selling, but there are actions you can take now that will make your business irresistible to an acquirer in the future. And in this book, you'll get answers to your most vexing questions, like, when's the right time to sell? How should I value my business? What are the biggest mistakes owners make when they sell? How do I get multiple offers? How do I attract an offer from an acquirer without looking like I'm desperate to sell? How many companies should I approach? How do I separate real acquirers from tire kickers? When in the process do I reveal my numbers? When and how do I tell my employees? How do I avoid retrading when the buyer drops their price during diligence? And the age-old, how do I avoid an earnout? Along with actionable answers to the questions, you'll also get a playbook for defending yourself against the dirty tricks used by the most unscrupulous acquirers, including how to defend yourself against retrading, acquirers who intentionally set unattainable earnout goals, financing an acquirer's business, becoming a prop deal, strategic pacing, competitors posing as acquirers, accepting illiquid or overvalued shares for your business in lieu of cash, and giving away your retained earnings as part of your deal. You'll also get easy to understand definitions of some of the most bewildering terms acquirers use in negotiating to buy your business. Stuff like tipping basket, covenant, downstroke, escrow, indemnification, earnout, QOV, reps and warranties, churn. I'm just about to throw up just using all this industry lingo, but you'll get a definition for each of them and an easy to understand package. If you order The Art of Selling Your Business today, you'll receive a collection of thank you gifts to enjoy alongside the book. Just go to builttosell.com/selling. So cool little story for you today. The best way I can kind of describe it to you is imagine the world of online dating, right? You've got two people trying to find each other, a certain level of criteria that each has things that are important to them, etc. My next guest, Daryl Lerner, took what he learned building an online dating app and brought it to the world of pet adoption. Imagine yourself, you're looking to get a new pet and you think you're going to adopt one, but you probably have some criteria. Maybe you need it to be hypoallergenic, or there's a certain energy level that you want for your dog. Well, that's what Daryl Lerner built in this app called AllPaws. He was able to, in a deft move, bring more than 100,000 listings almost overnight to his app, solving the chicken or egg problem. He'll describe how he did that. He also talks about what it was like to negotiate the sale of his company to a giant. He sold his business to PetSmart. How he brought Petco, PetSmart's biggest rival, into the negotiation. And what it felt like for him as an entrepreneur to be managed by his acquirer. Here to tell you the entire story is Daryl Lerner. Daryl Lerner, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks so much, John. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So AllPaws. I must confess, I've never actually used the app. I've adopted a dog, though. I went to the Humane Society in Toronto, and years ago, my wife and I just got married. We thought, well, we'll give training wheels instead of having kids. We'll get a dog, and we went to the Humane Society. So I guess I did it in a very old school kind of way. Tell me about AllPaws.
So AllPaws is what happens when an online dating founder decides to tackle the pet industry. in my prior life, I was in the online dating industry. I had a very popular Facebook app for a while. Grew the company significantly, and I was ready for something new. I missed the early stage feel, and sat in an office. I'd raised some friends and family money. Sat in an office. I had somebody with me, and literally started writing ideas on a piece of paper of what to do. And about 10 ideas. We were sitting there for a couple of months, and the girl who came to work with me was like, "Yeah, we got to do something." And I was like, we keep talking about how fun it would be to do something with pets. I'm like, let's just take the knowledge that we have from years of building a dating site and build a much better way for people to find their next pet. And we got to work on what turned out to be AllPaws. We spent quite a bit of time validating the concept. From the dating industry, I knew that first there had to be a critical mass of pets in order for the experience to be valuable. Because just like in dating, if you do a search and once you add your search filters, if there's 4 search results, it's a useless experience. You're never coming back to that product. So I kind of investigated, can we get 100,000 pets right off the bat? And it turns out there were some third-party services, APIs that had pet listings. So I'm like, okay, check. We can get launched with 100,000 pets. That's enough that people will get interesting search results.
We should define API, Daryl. So, a connection for your device to another database, essentially, that allowed that database to be served up in your app.
Yeah. So there was a group called a site called rescuegroups.org that basically served as, I'll call it inventory management for pet rescues and shelters. And one of the services they provided was the ability to upload their pets or the shelter pets onto other websites. So we were able to tap into that to get this critical mass of listings right off the bat.
But I guess at the same time, how did you reflect on the loss of control of how those listings would be displayed? Because you didn't necessarily control that anymore at that point.
Great question. So first of all, after years with the prior company of working on top of the Facebook platform, had a lot of experience of not being in direct control of your data and stuff like that. So that wasn't a shock. But one of the interesting things was I spoke to the guy who ran it, and I'm like, look, I have this vision. I want to take everything from the dating world, and right now, if you try to search for pet online, there might be breed, there might be location, whatever. I'm like, I want to add like 30 search filters. I want to add, temperament, allergies, all these different things. And is there a way to do that with your database? And he started laughing. He goes, we have all that. He said, nobody has ever asked for that before. So
wait, the rescuegroups.org had all that stuff on allergies and temperament?
It had all like 30 different search filters. Some organizations didn't necessarily upload all of it, but a lot of them did. And he's like, it's all just sitting there. No one's asked for it. And he really worked hand in hand with me in kind of customizing the product to get it to where I wanted it to be. So, what we really built was a dating site. It was just pets instead of people. Then to further
So let me see if I got it straight. So rescuegroups.org offers up their database to this API. So when somebody goes onto the app, they can query it. Your big idea was like, let's get a breadth of filtering criteria here so people can really choose what they're looking for in a dog or pet. And you launch with this great wealth of sort of the two-sided market. You've got one side of the market kind of nailed.
Correct. So that side of the market, I was like, check, we're going to get enough pets, at least from the start, and then we'll offer the ability for organizations to upload their own. But I'm like, I got to see if people want this. And so I spent, a few $100. I put up a coming soon page with an email capture, say, hey, AllPaws is going to be launching soon, enter your email address to learn more. And ran a few $100 worth of Google ads, adopt your next pet, 100,000 pets available for adoption, to see what kind of, first of all, what kind of click rates, but then more importantly, what percent of people would give us their email address. And, I kind of come from the testing and optimization background as a product person. So after kind of having some fun optimizing that page and headlines and, button copy, et cetera, we were getting 30, 35, 37% of people giving us their email address, which is just, absurd. And it's a really high number. I'm like, okay, there's clearly demand for this. And,
So let me get that straight. So of if you had 100 people land on that landing page, 35 of them were giving you their email address.
Exactly right. Once we had optimized it, and that was after quite a bit of optimization, but it was kind of just me having a little fun. But at the same time, it was validating that there's going to be a need. This is going to be interesting. And from my background, in the startup world, I'm like, I think we can build a much better product, a product that's 10 times better than anything on the market. And
so where does it go from there? So you validated it. Did you launch with Google AdWords as your channel?
I hired a programmer, developer who had worked with us at the previous company, a guy I knew real well, super talented. He built the product in, I'm going to say about 4 months. So this is, we ended up launching about, I want to say November 2013. And I ended up, I decided I can usually figure almost anything out. But I think one important skill for entrepreneurs is kind of figure out what they're good at, figure out where it makes sense for them to put their focus and where to delegate. Sure. I didn't have a lot of experience with ad buying, and I was doing my own tests, and I just knew that it was going to be a really long haul for me to figure this out and optimize this. Started asking around, got referred to a really, really talented ad buyer. One of the good things about the pet adoption industry is it's not a lot of competition for keywords because you don't have big money behind it. And we really refined our marketing funnel. By the time we were done, we were paying 5-6 cents a click for a new user and under $1 for a registered user. And that allowed us to really scale quickly, especially once we added in some viral mechanics. We were getting traffic from social, really focused on emails.
So you're investing in paid search to drive the consumer side of the two-sided market.
Correct.
Where did you get the money to invest in paid search? Did you raise a round of investment, or how did that work? Yeah.
So I was kind of in the unusual situation because the previous company, which was called Snap Interactive, had done very well. I was able to raise some friends and family money for my next venture, even pre-concept. So I found myself in this weird situation. I'm like, I have an office, I have an employee, I have cash in the bank, but I have no idea what to do with it. Kind of the opposite of every other entrepreneur.
Sure.
But that allowed us to kind of fund the early stages of growth and build out the product.
How much did you raise friends and family, and what portion of the company did you have to give up for that?
Probably at the end of the day, about $1 million. I want to say probably for about a quarter-ish of the company.
Got it. Okay. So that's a pretty high valuation for an idea, or even pre-idea.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So you get into it. The business is what's the business model? Like, what was the vision for making money?
Yeah. So good question. My philosophy, and especially coming from a dating site that we grew to 100 million users, almost entirely virally, a little bit of kind of irrational exuberance. I'm like, I don't need to worry about that. I'll figure it out when the time comes. I'm just going to focus on getting a lot of users, and the rest will take care of itself, just like it did before. And started getting a lot of users, and started throwing up some Google ads. Making a few $100s a day. I'm like, this really isn't going to do the trick. I'm like, got to figure something better out. And we met a company along the way called Pet360. They owned a bunch of properties in the industry, and I had just reached out.
Website properties, or
yes, okay. They owned PetMD, Pet360.com, PetFoodDirect.com, kind of a whole variety of pet sites and apps. And I had just reached out to them to get kind of better advertising, and almost immediately got an email from their head of business development, subsequently led to a meeting with their CEO. We decided they wanted to collaborate with us on a joint platform, a white labeled version of Pet360 using the AllPaws backend. And we were going to have sponsorships and all that. So they put me in touch with their media division, their ad sales team. And things got derailed a little bit with the platform because it turns out they were in negotiation with PetSmart, and they were subsequently sold to PetSmart for $160 million. But So I got pretty friendly with their two head media guys, ad sales guys. And I remember saying like, all right, well, while we're waiting for this joint platform, can we, run some ads on AllPaws? And they're like, yeah, I think we can get you some sponsorships. We could probably get you about $25,000 a quarter. And I looked at them, I said, okay, let's add a zero to that. And they laughed. I'm like, I'm serious. I'm like, I want to do 250,000 a quarter.
Daryl, you lost me a little bit. So when you say to run some ads on AllPaws, you're referring to, brands like Purina and other,
Exactly.
dog related products.
So they did media sales. They had relationships with all these pet brands.
Got it.
And they would get kind of deeper partnerships and sponsorships, beyond just traditional like Google AdSense or something like that.
So the business model that you landed on was ad supported effectively. You were going to run ads on AllPaws. Got it.
Yes. After also trying a whole bunch of other things in between, but yes.
And so were you successful in getting some advertising going?
Yeah. So that was a great conversation. I still remember the look on their face when I'm like, add a zero to that number. And they're like, you can't. And I'm like, why not? They're like, start explaining impressions and you just don't have the traffic. I'm like, okay, what would I need to do to achieve my goal? And they're like, well, you'd need a lot more impressions and you'd need stuff that was performing at a much higher rate that added a lot more value. I'm like, okay, let me get back to you. And I came back to them with a plan, a whole bunch of just really creative ad placements. I'll get you a good example. Like one of our big partners, our biggest partner became Royal Canin, the pet food brand.
Sure.
And they specialize in breed-specific pet nutrition. So one of the things we did for them is their like biggest 13 breeds or something. Anytime someone searched, let's say for a German Shepherd, a breed modal would pop up with some info, fun facts on a German Shepherd, along with a coupon for
so smart.
Their German Shepherd food. We started on the post sign-up page. There was a welcome. Oh, by the way, now that you're interested in adopting a pet, are you interested in learning more about, veterinarians in your area, trainers in your area, pet food, supplements, all these different things? Started creating opt-in leads. So I came back to them with this whole plan, and they're like, okay, this works. And they got us, it wasn't quite the 250 a quarter level, but we got two initial buys from Royal Canin and Brevecto, which is a flea and tick manufacturer. And the Royal Canin partnership really stuck, and it did get to the levels that I wanted. One of the really... Go ahead.
Before you go, I just need to understand, what was so important to you about the $250,000 a quarter? Like, what did that mean to you?
Absolutely nothing. It was just a 10x of the number they gave me.
Okay.
I like to think big. And I literally just said, okay, you said 25,000 a quarter, add a zero to it. I was just like, okay, 25,000 a quarter is not going to support this business. I got to figure out how to make this a 7-figure revenue business and quickly. So, kind of tell me what I need to do. I'll come back to you. I'll do it.
Got it.
One of the really cool things we did with Royal Canin, we put in this process to confirm adoption so that we could find out when someone actually successfully adopted a pet from the site. And we came up with this new pet parent welcome package that Royal Canin would send out. And this was we were all doing it, by hand. Like, they would literally mail the packages, but we were testing it. We would send them a list of, here's the people who have adopted a pet this month. Here's the pet they adopted. And they would say, congrats on adopting, Kona. Here's a welcome kit from your friends at Royal Canin. And stuff like that, we really kind of emphasized this whole, capturing the new pet parent at the point of market entry, right? It's the one time in your adoption journey where you haven't already formed purchasing habits. And more and more, we focused on that in our pitches. One of the really fun things that we did worked both for the media deals and then subsequently when we went to sell the company is we would do mocks of these kind of things in advance. We would mock up potential placements. And these were all these different creative things. For PetSmart, for example, we created a post sign-up page. We presented them with a post sign-up page that said, welcome to AllPaws. We're so excited that you're going to adopt a pet. Once you do, PetSmart wants to present you with $400 off a $400 new pet parent welcome package. And by the way, here are the 6 PetSmart locations closest to your home, which we got from your IP address.
Oh, I love that.
So it was, and actually putting that in front of these brands, they loved. They loved seeing that. It wasn't just, oh, we could theoretically do this and that, and seeing it mocked up on the site. It captured
it takes the conversation up a new level from the kind of cost per thousand advertising.
Exactly.
And you make such a wonderful point around reaching the dog parent at that first,
point of market
stage.
Entry. I would say it was so drilled into me. New pet parents reach them at the point of market entry.
Point of market entry. Love it. I'm reminded of like all the brands that try to flog their products on new moms when they've got their little baby, and like Pampers is hawking stuff and Huggies and all the rest of it.
That's exactly it. That's your chance to get people, when they haven't formed purchasing habits.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. So how big did you get this company before you decided that it was time to sell?
So we had gotten to about 1.5 million registered users, registering meaning they created an account on the site. You didn't have to create an account, but then we captured much more information. We were doing probably about over 1 million visits a month. We had subsequently launched an iPhone app. It was kind of like a Tinder for finding pets to adopt. And that one was doing great. We were getting 500 to 1,000 new downloads a day, never spent a penny on marketing on that. And, it was top 100 in the lifestyle category of the App Store. And, so we were kind of rocking and rolling, and, these were pretty big numbers, and they were growing, month after month, quarter after quarter. And, a couple of things happened. One, we reached a point where these ad deals we became a slave to servicing them. It was great. We were doing $1 million a year in ad deals. We had a big one from Royal Canin. They kept renewing. PetSmart, same thing. But I felt like the business had become, pitching these ad deals, these sponsorships, and then, putting in all the placements and then doing the reporting. And we had kind of gotten away from, really focusing on growth and iterating and optimizing and all that kind of stuff. And that, that wasn't super fun for me.
Yeah. I just want to go back to something you said earlier, because I just want to make sure I have it in my mind. The original AllPaws, I'll call it app, was it a web-based app that I would access through a web browser on a computer, and it was only subsequent to that you built the iPhone app?
Exactly. Yeah. We launched the website in November 2013. We launched the iPhone app, I want to say fall of 2014. And then this is getting through about 2015. Totally purely coincidentally, I had purchased and read Built to Sell around the same time.
Boy, that's awesome.
I guess in my head, I was starting to think about, okay, right now this business is, really driven by whatever ideas I have. And I felt like I was kind of holding it together. Like, how do I reposition this? And I really started to focus on the offering to brands and, the data we were capturing from pet owners. And again, even with this advertising, with the mocks, like, hey, we have our user acquisition optimized. We have this funnel, it's churning. If there was a brand that could get behind it, you just keep turning the crank and it'll work really well. And then the other thing that happened, June of 2015, my dad passed away unexpectedly. And he was, we were super, super close. And he was involved in the business with me, not in a day-to-day role, but he had helped me raise some of the capital and an advisory role. And, that was obviously one of those life events. And, at a time when I wanted to be focused on grieving and everything like that, I'm like, okay, I have a business that, I had gotten to the point where we're actually running profitably, but, we weren't growing and we were kind of stagnating. And we're still growing a little bit, but not in the sense of, from the startup world, this isn't going to be $1 billion company. This isn't going to be a unicorn. So, I was kind of focused on three parallel tracks at that point. One was testing some features that were getting away from adoption, that were more social. I thought there might be a much larger opportunity there. And I was, very quietly testing a bunch of things on the back end, for the user. It was an activity feed or create a profile of your existing pets. But I was really gathering data to see how the users would interact with those features and if there was potential to build something much bigger, much more social.
Like a Facebook for dog parents?
We joked Instagram for pets.
Instagram for pets. Okay, cool.
And it's funny. I remember saying it to me, during the whole second half of 2015, the only time you would smile when talking about the business was when talking about this Instagram for pets idea. Then I was focused a little bit on raising capital and, which was tough. I mean, we got insane press. We were getting coverage. Good Morning America, Mashable, every Good Housekeeping, every major name. And there was never any inbound interest, which was really strange because
inbound interest from acquirers or investors, you mean?
From investors. Because I know in the past, anytime we would get a TechCrunch article, we would have, 10 phone calls or emails. I think people thought we were a not-for-profit, as in pet adoption. And I'm just like, okay, this is going to be, a slog to raise capital. And, as you and your audience no doubt knows, raising capital is a long, arduous process. And I just didn't know that my head was in it at that point, after losing my dad and everything. And then the third was a sale. I started, what I really asked myself, I'm like, do I feel like I'm at the beginning of this journey or the end of this journey? And, when taken together with the previous experience with Snap, that was a, 10-year process. I was tired, kind of the girl who was working with me was relocating. She was getting married. It kind of felt like this might be the end of the process. And I didn't know if I had, another several years of real passion in it. I asked around for some recommendations for some bankers who focused on M&A. And I distinctly remember I had a conversation. Ironically, it was with the guy who was the CEO of Pet360, a guy named Brock. And I remember kind of laying out my options for him. I like to get advice from other people. Ultimately, I'm going to do what I think is best, but it helps to talk to people who have been down that road and gather all their feedback.
What a Brock said.
And I remember him saying to me, he's like, you got to pick a path. He's like, you'll execute successfully in whichever one you do, but you can't do all three. You got to pick one. And I almost at that point, I had to give myself permission to be okay with pursuing a sale. Because in a way, it meant, all right, this isn't going to be $1 billion business. I didn't build a unicorn. But I'm like, you know what? Go ahead.
Keep going.
Oh, I'm like, you know what? If I can get some money out of this, investors get their money. And, at this point, we had 2.5 employees. It wasn't like I had a whole team that was, dependent upon me. And I can then, take some time off. I'm like, that's an okay outcome. And I kind of convinced myself that I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with that outcome. And
let me ask you a question, because I find it interesting. Because on one hand, the numbers you throw out are to my eyes, are just stunning. Like I'm looking at 1.5 million registered users. 500 downloads a day of your app. I mean, these are just astonishing numbers. And then when we talk about the size of the company, 2.5 employees, 1 million or so in revenue, it's like, what was that like to have this in e-commerce terms, in technology terms? Those numbers are like world-class, massive, but on the size of the company, it must have felt weird. Did that feel conflicted on some level?
It's a great question. It felt exhausting and lonely. But it's interesting because, my previous company, we had done real well. We were doing 20 million in revenue annually. We had 100 million users. This was almost like if you put an entrepreneur in a laboratory, said, okay, here's $1 million. We're going to lock you in for 2 years, come out of it with a business that's worth more than that. that was kind of what it felt like. I would just sit at my desk, kind of by myself every day and go, okay, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? How do I make it bigger? How do I meet people? I mean, I knew nobody in the pet industry when I went in. One of the things I was most proud of is by the time we were done, I got to know the CEOs of a lot of prominent companies in the industry. So it was, it was kind of weird. There weren't, it wasn't a big office with ping pong tables like we had the last time. And it was almost, I felt like I was like in a little laboratory every day, just, like churning out this product into achieving an ultimate goal of building a successful business.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get into it. So you talk to Brock. He's like, pick a lane, buddy. You can't be half pregnant here.
Exactly.
You got to do something. What next? You hired an M&A person to?
Yeah. So I asked, tapped my network, asked for a few referrals for bankers. Couple said, I don't think this is going to be saleable. I mean, obviously, the best time to sell a business is when you're not trying. It's a lot harder when you're trying. So, I didn't know what to expect. And one of the bankers I spoke to said, this isn't for me, but I have someone who it might be for. And he referred me to a boutique investment bank in New York called Triangle Capital.
Triangle Capital. Okay.
Triangle Capital, middle market firm. And they, had a call with them. They weren't sure. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, the lead guy, a guy named Richard Kestenbaum, great guy. He's like, I want to meet you in person. I want to talk to you. And comes in, we talk about the business for an hour. He's like, you come across very genuine, very enthusiastic, very passionate about this business and what you built. He said, we weren't going to take the assignment. He said, I think we can sell this business. He said, it's going to sell for 7 figures. The question is it a low 7-figure number and a high 7-figure number? That really depends on you, and it depends on how many horses we can get into the race.
What was your reaction to that pitch from him?
I was happy to hear that he thought he could sell it. It wasn't my first rodeo, so I cautiously optimistic. The idea of a low 7-figure number didn't excite me. But I figured, okay, let's see where this goes.
What did you think it could be worth? Like if low 7 figures wasn't exciting, did you have any sense of what would have been exciting?
Certainly a mid to high 7-figure number was a lot more interesting. Make sure investors made something and, make sure I came out of it with something. But we didn't have a lot of cash left at that point. I mean, we weren't losing money, but if any of these ad deals disappeared, like that would have been it. So, I figured, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go down this path. I have to be all in on it. I was hoping he was right. And, he said to me, he's like, give me a number that I need to know you're serious, that you will absolutely sell this business for. And I started thinking, I said, it's got to be like $3 million. I said, if you can get me a deal for $3 million plus, I'll take it. All other things being equal, nothing wacky. And I said, like, honestly, anything less than that, I'm not going to do an acqui-hire. And if someone wants to pay $1 million for this, I'd rather, even though I don't want to do it, I'd rather bet on myself and I'll build it back up. But we went through the process. And
what was Richard's reaction to the 3 million number?
He thought it was very doable. It's funny, in preparation for this interview, I reread Built to Sell last night, and it was so funny. I mean, your description of the process with the bankers was dead on. Every aspect, from me saying, well, we don't have a lot of cash, I can't afford a retainer, to then saying, we got to have something to show that you're serious. And me saying, I don't want to work for an acquirer after that. And then saying, you can't tell them that, and we kind of rehearsed, look, your line is going to be, it's important for you, for the business to, end up in good hands. You'll gladly participate in the transition. You have to be, you're open-minded, but you're also an entrepreneur. So, you'll see how it goes, kind of thing.
That's great to hear. How did Richard coach you on answering the question, like, will you stick around and help us, like, work in the company for a while?
Yeah. So he's like, look, you're going to have to commit to being a part of a transition. I told him, I'm like, I'm not going to relocate. And he said, that's fair. He said, so tell him you won't relocate, but you will absolutely commit to a transition, making sure that the business ends up in good hands, comes to a soft landing. And, he said, tell them that, you've just gone through a major life event. You're open-minded. You really don't have a lot of thoughts beyond that. You're happy to kind of see what unfolds. In my mind, I knew there's no way I'm staying anywhere for an extended period of time, but, he said, you can't say that.
How not to answer the question. Got it. Okay. So, you guys go back and forth. Richard, were you at all concerned giving Richard your bottom line? In sometimes there's a theory in real estate, right, where you never give your bottom line to your real estate agent because you think, oh, they're going to whisper that to the other side, and magically the offer you get is like you're exactly their bottom line. Were you worried at all about sharing that level of detail with Richard?
Very. So. Great point. The way I addressed it, I structured kind of an unconventional deal with them where their commission on the sale went up as the price went up. So I wanted them totally motivated to get a much higher price rather than like you're saying, okay, we easily got a $3 million deal. That's, so the more we sold for, the more they made at an increasing rate. And it definitely served, I think, to keep them highly motivated. So great question.
And that is unusual for folks who are listening. Oftentimes a commission goes down for each extra million you get. So you might, an advisor might make X percent on the first million and then X minus 20% on the second million and down. Exactly. And you went the opposite way.
I remember having a discussion with my brother Cliff, who I was partners with in the previous company, and it's a accomplished entrepreneur in his own right. And we were having that exact discussion. He's like, look, you got to make sure your interests are aligned. And, let's structure something where the more the sale is, the more they make. And, we kind of came up with this structure. And I think it served us very well.
Fantastic. So who does Richard shop it to? How big's the short list or the long list?
I should also add there's two other people at Triangle who I work closely with, Errol Glasser and Kim Karmitz. All were great. We came up with a list of they came up with a list of about, I want to say 50 companies. As is normal in the process, the list cast a pretty wide net. It included some companies that, maybe had pet content, but weren't pet companies, but we had a pretty good feel. And certainly I did right off the bat, who the 4 or 5 that would be, especially interested would be.
Who did you think in the 4 or 5 were, and why did you think they were strategic?
I thought, I'll name a couple. I thought PetSmart for sure, because PetSmart, by buying Pet360, already participated in our business and had our media revenue or a percentage of our media revenue. I also did something that I have to pat myself on the back for. It was pretty strategic. So I had befriended a reporter, a writer, and she's like, I'll do a story on you for Forbes, but I got to have a good business angle. And for like a year, I kept pitching her all of these stories about, our growth and raising money and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, these aren't interesting. Finally, I came to her. I'm like, all right, I have something different. Let's talk about, the performance of our ad placements and our sponsorships, how we're allowing brands to connect with new pet parents at the point of market entry, that whole pitch. It's like, that's really interesting. I said, all I ask, you can write anything you want. Just give me like a 2 or 3 line quote that I can write myself. And she agreed. And in the quote, I talked about how we are getting deal after deal and renewals from partners like Royal Canin and PetSmart because of the high performance of their placements, and how this is such a great opportunity for other large retailers and brands. And sure enough, it worked like clockwork. Within a week, I had a phone call from Petco. And Petco and PetSmart are very competitive. And we were working on a pretty sizable sponsorship or ad deal with Petco. PetSmart exercised their right of first refusal to take the Petco deal. And that basically, they knew I was also starting to look into selling the company. that jump-started their participation in the process because they knew that Petco was interested in us on at some level.
Love it. I love the Forbes angle. It's brilliant. What was the right of first refusal? So with PetSmart, they had the ability to accept any advertising package that you were offering somebody else. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't remember the specifics, but I think when we did our ad deal with them, it gave them the right of first refusal. I want to say for an ad deal with any other pet retailer. It might have even specifically said Petco because they were super competitive with each other.
Got it.
So they immediately jumped on that, and that drew them into the process. And to go back to your question, another one I thought would have been interested was Royal Canin because they were our biggest partner. Mm-hmm. And, that kind of really opened my eyes to how so much of an M&A process comes down to timing and circumstance. They never really got in the game. Their home base is in Europe, and their CEO was traveling or something to that effect. They were the managing director, and they were kind of late into the game. They couldn't get up to speed in time. And as this process went through, you have to kind of set deadlines and when indications of interest are due, when bids are due. And they were just trailing and never really got into it.
It's so funny because as entrepreneurs, our company is so important to us. It's like we think about it all day and night, and we think about all the strategic reasons why company A would want to buy us, and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, yeah, well, the CEO is just kind of traveling this week, or, they had a retreat and somebody broke their leg. And so they're all focused on, it's the craziest things happen, but it's why we need a relatively big list of potential acquirers to go to.
I mean, when we kind of narrowed it down to, let's say, the 6 or so who wanted, the bigger book, meaning all of the whole merger package, several of them were obvious to me. Several of them were complete surprises, companies we'd never spoken to or dealt with.
And those are companies that Triangle put on the list?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what were there private equity groups, or what were?
There were a couple of private equity groups in there that never went too far with it. Of the final group that was interested, I don't think I can give names, but so it came down to 2 who ended up making bids. One was PetSmart. One was a company we had never dealt with that essentially was a holding company for a bunch of different brands in the pet industry. One other that got pretty far down the line was a pet food manufacturer, natural pet foods. Mm-hmm. I had no relationship with them at all. Never even thought about them, but they got pretty far with us. Another large pet food brand, also somewhat far. I was actually surprised they didn't bid. I made a trip to meet them in person. They ended up not bidding. But ultimately, Triangle put out a deadline for indications of interest. And, it's kind of sitting there going, okay, I'm preparing to be stood up and get nothing. And I remember Kim over there emailing me. She's like, well, we have a bid. And she told me who it was from. And I was like, really? Like, that was the holding company I mentioned. They said, I wasn't expecting that. And she's like, and it's above your number. I'm like, wow. And then PetSmart came in with a bid that was also above my number. I was like, great. I'm like, we got 2 bids, both already above my number. I'm like, just don't, like, whatever you do, don't blow this deal. Like, I'll take either one of them, sell.
What was Triangle's response to don't blow it, I'll take either one?
No, they're like, they said, we know what we're doing. It'll all work out. And, they kind of just prepared me for the process to come.
How much of a difference between the two? I know we can't talk exactly what the number was, but on a percentage basis, how much of a difference would there have been between the 2 offers?
They were both ranges. I would say range of a couple $1 million. So, probably a 30-40% difference.
Okay.
So it was clear that one of them, which turned out to be PetSmart, was the leader. Triangle talked to me. They're like, we're pretty sure we can get them both to come up. We think the other one will come up quite a bit. But PetSmart was the leader. And,
Got it.
So at that point we had a lot of discussions around, which one's going to make sense, what's involved with me, what the process was like, the due diligence, which I'm a very organized, detail-oriented person. It astounded me the level of due diligence performed during this process.
Yeah, I can only imagine. When you go back, if we go back to the two offers again, you mentioned they were a range. Did you mean that on the letter of intent, instead of providing a specific number, they provided you a range, or did you mean that there was a range between the two offers?
No, they both provided a range of, let's say, roughly $1 million. This is subject to, further due diligence, blah, blah, blah.
Wow. Okay.
These were non-binding indications of interest. And
okay.
So I think we went with the first group. A bunch of them flew out to meet me. And that's another thing about the process, actually, that I found quite interesting. I had maybe 4 in-person meetings during all of this. I had more meetings. It was harder getting ad deals than it was doing the M&A deal. I remember saying to bankers, I'm like, aren't they going to aren't we going to have 10-hour sessions? They're like, no, these companies that have made acquisitions, they have their process. You get them all their materials. They'll want to meet you, certainly. But it was kind of surprising how few phone calls and meetings there were.
That's really funny and how clinical that sounds. So these were indications of interest. That's an important distinction as opposed to a letter of intent. They were an IOI. Did you take both of the IOIs through to the next stage, or did you commit to one?
So I think, if memory serves, we we shared more material with them over a couple of weeks, had a meeting. PetSmart knew us pretty well already from our pre-existing relationship.
Sure.
Kind of got them to the point of all right, what's your real number here? And ultimately the PetSmart number ended up being a fair bit higher, not a ton, but enough to make a difference. And
higher than the original range they gave you?
It was at the top end of their range, and it was higher than the other offer, which ended up going above their range as well. But they wouldn't go to where PetSmart went.
Got it.
And, it's kind of in these negotiations. I remember the banker saying to me, they're like, look, when to push and when not to push. These are each of their limits. Can we say, let's add 500,000 because they're like, these are their numbers. It's time.
And what did they share with you about the body language, the tenor of the conversations, what's in the agreement that would lead them to believe that they had pushed them as far as they could?
I think it just came from their experience. They seem pretty confident. They've been doing this a long time. I just remember Richard kind of saying to me, he's like, it's time. These are their numbers. He goes, if you start squeezing them anymore, you're going to run the risk of losing the deal. And, I trusted him.
And so let's just be clear, because this is an important nuance. So the IOIs, indication of interest, were ranges. You went through another level of diligence or meetings with both parties.
Correct.
And then had them firm those offers up into a letter of intent or an LOI, I'm assuming.
So we kind of, if I remember correctly, we kind of put a deadline right after July 4th. This is 2016 of, all right, we kind of need your bottom line number. And at that point, we spent about a day going back and forth with each of them. And then I went into the Triangle office and we kind of looked at the offers and they're like, all right, it's time to pick one and move to a letter of intent. And we picked the PetSmart offer and drew up a letter of intent pretty quickly and moved into the, really serious due diligence phase, moving toward a closing date.
And so a lot of water's under the bridge since then. A lot of time has passed. Have you ever personally reflected on whether Richard was right that pushing them further would have made one of them walk? Or, again, I'll just speak from my own experience. Whenever I've sold a home, oftentimes, and I hate to equate selling a business, selling a home, but oftentimes I'll get some subtle pressure from my agent who says, hey, this is their offer. This is the best we can do.
And I've thought about it after that. I was thinking maybe I should have gone back one more time, one more turn. Like, have you thought 5 years on now since the deal, was there more money? Could I have pushed further? Was Richard just trying to get a deal done versus really being genuine?
No question. He was not just trying to get a deal done. I got to know the deal guy over at PetSmart pretty well. Look, if I had said, the number is $100,000 higher or nothing, would they have done it? Maybe. But it was pretty clear to me. I subsequently saw their business case and, their internal documents. This was their number. I don't know if they would have walked over a demand for a little more, but clearly the risk reward didn't justify making the demand based on kind of the banker's evaluation, as well as my own evaluation. Things like, I was very happy with that number. It was, a lot more than my original kind of number. So I didn't want to do anything to risk the deal. I was like, I spent the next 3 months, kind of just closing my eyes. I'm like, just don't fall apart. Don't fall apart. Like, it becomes virtually impossible to run your business as normal while a deal like this is about to happen.
Yeah, I think people have heard about due diligence as being this very difficult period where the attention to detail and all these things are incredibly important. But I think it would be interesting for folks to hear what was the most peculiar, surprising thing that you were asked for in the diligence period that you're like, you want to see what?
I think the most surprising thing was just truly the level. I mean, the level of the volume of requests. Like, I'm like, look, we're a 2.5 person company, right? There's at this point, $100,000 in the bank. Like, there's not a lot to do. And, they had Simpson and Thatcher's IP attorney quizzing me on stuff. I remember in one case in particular, we had hired an outside developer to work on one feature. Like, over a couple of weeks, he worked with our developer on it. It was a common application feature. And they didn't love the language in the freelance agreement we had signed with him. And I was just like, we want him to go to, we want to have a new agreement or something like that. And I'm just like, guys, this is someone I haven't spoken to in 3 years. I dealt with for, a minute and a half. He doesn't know I exist. I'm like, I'm telling you, if we go to him, it's going to do more harm than good. His role is something, it's a feature that's not even on the product. And we spent a considerable amount of time on this. I'm like, look, I'll rep whatever you need me to rep to. Ultimately, part of the deal structure was there was $1 million holdback against any future claims. I'm like, I'm fine with that. There's not going to be any claims. There was, initial resolutions from like the formation of the business they didn't love. We had to, redo a resolution, basically affirming all the prior resolutions.
Crazy stuff.
Every piece of paper in my office ended up in their hands by the time we were done. It was.
How did you guys handle? Because you and Richard had this long conversation about like your role and how not to answer the question. So how did they structure your role, post sale?
Yeah, so it turned out to be really interesting and somewhat surprising. I remember the offer that we did not take. The language was that I would agree to be an employee for 1 year. Anything further by mutual agreement, and I did not have to relocate. So I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. And PetSmart's offer, which ended up turning out to cause some friction, was that I was a consultant for up to 1 year. I could be terminated at any time. I didn't have to work full time, and I didn't have to relocate. And one interesting thing was. It's funny when you're negotiating these terms, like you're so focused on the big picture. But I remember adding in that no travel, right? Travel was not required because they were based in Phoenix and I'm in New York. And about a week after the deal was done, I get an email from one of the high ups there. All right, everyone on the AllPaws deal team, please be in Phoenix on Monday. And I'm like, yeah, this is why I put in the no travel thing. But I remember talking to a couple of my contacts over there, and they're like, look, I know that, you like to please and you want to do the right thing and you still care and all that. But I'm telling you, this is going to set the tone for the next year. You have to say no. And I felt really badly doing it. But I said, I'm sorry, my agreement is no travel. That doesn't work for me. And our main contact over there, who I had a really good relationship with, the guy who did the deal, he called me. He's like, look, they really want the deal team there. Is there any shot sometime in the next few weeks you could come out for a day? I said, of course. I said, why couldn't they have asked like that? Like, that is perfectly reasonable. Of course I will be there. That's very different from, be here next Monday. But it was funny because I was like, I'm glad that I got that, that clause in the deal.
It's so interesting, right? Because as entrepreneurs, like, nobody tells us what to do. You're like, be here next Monday. What, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Like, no. But when it's couched as like, this will be a favor, and we, it's totally a different reaction.
Absolutely.
But he's like working for some giant company. He's like, when I say jump, you say how high. And if I want you're on,
Well, that's exactly what my contacts there said to me. They're like, that's what he's used to. They use that exact terminology, right? If he says jump, they say how high. And I am not used to it. I've worked for myself my entire life.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, that's for sure. Did you have any sort of earnout that you had to achieve, or was it simply a consulting contract on demand, you were available, et cetera?
It was exactly what you described. It was consulting on demand. The only thing was, as I said, there was $1 million holdback, which I took on the entirety of personally rather than having any investors subject to that.
That was generous of you.
Yeah, I wanted them to do as well as possible. So, that was on me. But other than that, yeah, they kept me the full year. And I used to joke to people, they would ask, how's it going? I'm like, well, I work from home. I work part-time. I've already gotten my money. That said, this has been one of the most stressful years of my life.
Really?
It was just, I'm used to, it was hard to teach myself that I didn't have to care as much, right? It wasn't my product. It wasn't my decision anymore. They paid me for it. And their goals were very different than my goals. And when things were broken, whereas I was used to having a panic attack, it didn't have the same importance to them. It was hard to separate myself from my baby. I actually did a lot of reading on, looking for advice on, how to handle working with an acquirer post transaction. And finally, I read one piece, I think on Quora, and it was, that really hit home with me. And it was basically be Zen, just best efforts, be Zen about everything. Aim to please, and but understand it's not yours. And
but again, what a difference for most entrepreneurs, right? Who take ownership, who are action oriented, who are like they live and die the result. And to flip a switch like that
it was so tough. Hard. The flipping of the switch for me really took place over the entirety of that year. It took a long time for me to be like, all right, emails aren't going out this morning, okay. Like, I'll let them know.
Zen.
That was actually, I literally saying, okay, just be Zen about it. Let them know. And I remember Brock giving me advice, telling me, anytime you respond, just make sure that you show, keep saying, any way I can help, I'm happy to, I'm available to help, whatever you need, just everything on paper, always, make clear that you're trying to help them, you're available. Don't say anything that could ever be, used against you.
Sure. In writing, for sure. Yeah.
That was really the approach I finally got around to.
When you sold, how much of your listings, how many of your listings, I guess I mean what proportion of your listings were from the original rescuegroups.org organization? Was it still the vast majority, or?
No, it's a good question. So by the time we sold, we probably had in the neighborhood of 250 to 300,000 pets at a time. I would say about 100 were the original Rescue Groups pets. 100 were actually had kind of I joke, a frenemies relationship with a competitor called Adopt-A-Pet, which is I think the second largest site in the industry. And we had about 100,000 listings from them as well through a strange partnership. The guy who runs it was a great guy. And then we got about another 50 to 100,000 through direct listings, shelters signing up on their own.
And did those relationships with rescuegroups.org and Adopt a Pet, were they scrutinized as part of PetSmart's diligence? Was that something they wanted to dig into further?
Not as much as you would have thought. I know we sent a bunch of stuff to their technology folks. They weren't focused on that very much. Again, I mean, I don't know if that I have a specific example, but the things that I would have focused on weren't the thing. They were really focused on legal. There was a lot of scrutiny. We had like a really small line of credit, like a $50,000 credit line. That was something, you asked for something peculiar, they spent a ton of time on. That had to be closed prior to the deal closing in order for not to break a covenant for one of their larger credit facilities. So like that was like a major focus. Like you have to prove this is closed. Trying to figure out exactly how much cash was going to be in the bank at the time of the sale so that the sale could be adjusted by that cash. And I'm like, literally, like we're talking $16,000, but it was screwed. Like, so no, they didn't focus. They didn't focus a lot on running the product. And in fact, for most of my year there, I continued to run it almost business as usual.
Yeah, it makes sense. Can you please take me inside the conversation that you had with one of those original investors? I'd love to know how you handled the conversation, what their reaction was, where it happened. Can you paint the picture for me?
Yeah. So the reaction varied. I kind of told a bunch of people what I was thinking, and I laid out. I'm like, look, we're in an unusual scenario. Like most startups, 90+% of them fail. Most of them are either an out or a home run. And I said, we're in a weird position where we're going to hit a double or a triple. And it's going to be strange because you're basically going to get your money back if I'm able to execute a sale. And some of them, some were people I was close to, and they're like, look, whatever you do, great. Others I had no relationship with or no close relationship with. They didn't really care. A couple of people were just thrilled to get a check back. They're like, we kind of considered this found money. We wrote it off and made the investment. A couple others had no reaction, kind of ran the gamut. But they all knew, or at least most of them knew about my dad and everything. They kind of understood the situation. And, I had made clear, like, look, we've built a great business, but, there's not a lot of cash in the bank. And if we continue forward, there's a risk of getting nothing. And I think that this is the right move for everybody.
Yeah. Did you buy yourself any sort of trophy or reward for selling?
Bought my wife a treadmill. That was her big request. Actually, the house that you're looking at is probably the big trophy. But
good for you.
Thank you.
Well, listen, there are a lot of memories.
Stuff.
I'm sure that'll be great.
On the smaller side, I think there were a couple of things that I remember in particular. One was that trip out to Phoenix that I mentioned right after the deal closed, when I ultimately did go there. The meeting was on a Monday, and I said to my wife, who's a teacher, like, let's make a little trip out of it. And so, we booked Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the Four Seasons in Scottsdale. And I'm like, let's get a suite.
Hopefully you charged PetSmart for that.
No, they paid.
Come on, man.
They paid for Sunday and Monday at the Westin.
Okay.
But I paid Friday, Saturday at the Four Seasons. I'm like, we can book a suite. Like, it's. Not that I had lived like a pauper before this, but it's an extra $500 a night. Yeah, great. Let's do it. Let's have some fun.
Good for you. I love hearing your story of how you spent the money, which is great. Listen, I really appreciate you sharing your story with such candor. How can if people want to reach, I know you've got a couple of projects, nothing major that you want to disclose or reveal. Maybe you do. Tell me what's going on now.
Well, I'm still in stealth mode, but after kind of 3 years of decompressing, taking some time, turning down some job offers and trying to figure out what the hell it is I wanted to do.
Dude, you are totally unemployable, by the way. I'm just going to tell you that right out of the gate.
It's the thing. This is what I do, So, and I came to that realization. So last spring, around the beginning of the pandemic, my brother and I started talking, and we came up with a shared vision around better connecting with your friends and network. And he and I are partnering again, and it's still kind of in stealth mode, but we're well into development on a project in the social messenger space that we're super excited about.
That's awesome. Well, you've let that little dangle there. That'll make me curious for a few months for sure.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned on that. Are you like a LinkedIn guy? Are you cool if people want to reach out to you on LinkedIn, or what's
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's
or any other social channels that you use.
Twitter and LinkedIn both are under my name, Darrell Lerner, DarrellLerner. If you misspell it, you'll probably find it anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll put that stuff in the show notes at builttosellradio.com. So Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah. Darrell, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
This was fun reliving the story, and I hope I was able to share some valuable insights for your audience.
Hey, if you like today's episode, you're going to love my new book, The Art of Selling Your Business. The book was inspired by the cohort of my guests over the years who have been able to negotiate an exit far better than the benchmark in their industry, sometimes 2 or 3 times more than I would have expected. I was curious to understand the tactics and strategies of these entrepreneurs and what they do differently from average performers. The result is a playbook for punching above your weight when it comes to selling your business. To learn more, go to builttosell.com/selling, where we put together a collection of gifts for listeners who order the book. Just go to builttosell.com/selling.
Thanks for listening to Built to Sell Radio with John Warrillow. For complete show notes with links to additional resources, visit builttosell.com/blog. John is the founder of the Value Builder System. To find out how to improve the value of your business by 71%, visit valuebuildersystem.com. John is also the author of Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You, and The Automatic Customer, Creating a Subscription Business in Any Industry. Connect with John at facebook.com/builttosell or on Twitter at John Warrillow, WARRILLOW. Thanks for listening.